The Great Hall of the Verith Dominion was the largest room ever built by any species in the known galaxy. It stretched for miles in every direction, with floors made of black stone so smooth that visitors could see their own faces in it. The ceiling was made of living crystal that caught the light of 3 captured stars and threw it across the room in patterns of gold and silver. It was a room built to make anyone who entered feel small and weak. Queen Zira the Valkoran had ruled from this hall for 3,000 years. She sat on a throne made of metal that moved and shifted like a living thing, reshaping itself to match her moods. Her body was tall and thin, covered in scales that changed color from deep purple to bright silver depending on the light. She had 4 eyes, each one able to see things that other species could not even imagine. Her claws were sharp enough to cut through steel, and her voice could shake the walls when she was angry. Today, she was bored. 40-7 species had sent their best representatives to this gathering. They came from every corner of the galaxy, each one hoping to win the favor of the most powerful empire ever known. The Verith Dominion controlled more than 10,000 worlds. Their ships could destroy entire planets. Their technology was so advanced that younger species thought it was magic. Everyone wanted to be their friend, or at least avoid being their enemy. The Tovani ambassador stepped forward first. He was a large creature, covered in thick brown fur, with 6 arms and a face full of sharp teeth. His species was known for their mighty war fleet. "Great Queen," he said, bowing low, "the Tovani Empire offers you 10,000 of our finest warships. Each one is crewed by warriors who have trained since birth. We offer them freely, asking only for the honor of fighting beside the Dominion." Queen Ziritha looked at him for a long moment. Then she waved her hand. "No." The Tovani ambassador's mouth fell open. "But, Your Majesty," I said no. Next, the Malaxian delegate came forward. She was a being made mostly of light, floating a few feet above the ground, leaving a trail of sparkles behind her. Her voice sounded like music. "Queen Ziritha, my people offer you the eternal crystals. There are enough of them to power your civilization for 10 million years. They are the rarest and most valuable substance in the universe. We give them to you without condition." The queen yawned. Not interested. Who was next? And so it went, hour after hour. The crystalline collective offered knowledge gathered over 50 million years of existence. The Vorthan Union promised to build weapons that could tear holes in space itself. The Silent Ones, who had not spoken to outsiders in 1,000 years, broke their silence to offer their services. Each offer was greater than the last. Each one was rejected. The representatives began to whisper among themselves. What did the queen want? What could possibly satisfy her? They had brought the greatest treasures of the galaxy, and she had turned them all away as if they were children's toys. The truth was that Queen Ziritha was not looking for gifts. She was looking for something she had not seen in a very long time. She was looking for something real. For 3,000 years, she had watched species come to her with their offerings. They smiled and bowed and said pretty words, but she could see the truth in their eyes. They were afraid. They did not come to her because they wanted to. They came because they needed her protection. Their gifts were not gifts at all. They were payments, bribes, desperate attempts to buy safety. And now, with the Void Swarm approaching from the outer reaches of the galaxy, they were more desperate than ever. The swarm consumed everything in its path. Entire civilizations had already been wiped out. Everyone knew that if the Dominion fell, they would all fall with it. So they came with their offerings, hoping to hide behind her power. And Ziritha was tired of it. "Is there no one here who is worthy?" she asked, her voice echoing through the hall. "Is there no one who has something real to offer?" That was when she saw him at the very back of the hall, almost hidden behind the larger delegates, stood a small figure in a simple gray uniform. He was not paying attention to the ceremony at all. Instead, he was writing something in a little book, his eyes focused on the pages in front of him. Ziritha had never seen a creature like him before. He had no scales, no fur, no armor of any kind. His skin was soft and bare. He had only 2 eyes, 2 arms, 2 legs. He looked fragile, like something that could be broken with a single touch. "You there," she called out, and her voice cut through the whispers like a knife. The small one in the back. "What world do you represent?" The creature looked up, surprised. He glanced around as if he thought she might be talking to someone else. Then he realized that every eye in the hall was on him. He closed his notebook and put it in his pocket. Then he walked forward, passing between delegates that towered over him. He did not seem afraid, which was strange. Most species trembled when the Queen spoke to them directly. "My name is Daniel Carter," he said, his voice calm and steady. "I represent Earth and the United Human Coalition." More whispers filled the hall. Earth, humanity. Most of the delegates had never heard of them. Those who had knew only that they were a very young species from a small planet on the edge of the galaxy. They had only discovered how to travel between stars a few hundred years ago. They were considered primitive by galactic standards, barely worth noticing. "And what does your coalition bring to this gathering, Daniel Carter of Earth?" Ziritha asked. She was curious now. This tiny creature had walked into a room full of the galaxy's most powerful beings and did not seem impressed by any of them. Daniel took a deep breath. "Honestly, Your Majesty, not much. We have a small fleet, maybe 300 ships. Our technology is probably a few centuries behind yours. We don't have rare minerals or ancient knowledge or superweapons. By the standards of everyone here, we don't have anything worth offering." Laughter broke out across the hall. Several delegates did not even try to hide their amusement. The Tovani ambassador snorted. The Malaxian's light flickered in what might have been a smile. Even some of Ziritha's own advisors were smiling. This was a joke. This human had come to the most important gathering in galactic history with nothing to offer. It was funny in a sad sort of way, but Ziritha was not laughing. She was watching Daniel Carter's face. He knew they were laughing at him. He knew how ridiculous he looked standing there in his plain uniform among the galaxy's greatest powers. And yet his expression did not change. "If you have nothing to offer," she said, "then why are you here?" Daniel met her eyes. All 4 of them. He did not look away, did not flinch, did not show any sign of fear. "Because when we heard about the Void Swarm," he said, "we could not just stay home and do nothing. Even if all we can offer is ourselves." The laughter stopped. No one in that hall had ever heard anyone say something like that before. Every other species had come with gifts, with bargains, with calculations about what they could gain. This human had come with nothing except a willingness to fight. A willingness to die. Queen Ziritha leaned forward on her throne, looking at this small, soft creature with new eyes. In 3,000 years, she had never met anyone quite like him. "Tell me more," she said. And Daniel Carter began to speak. Queen Ziritha dismissed the assembly that day without accepting a single offer. The delegates left confused and worried, whispering about what the Queen was planning. But she paid no attention to them. Her mind was focused on something else entirely. She summoned Daniel Carter to her private chambers. This was something that had not happened in over 200 years. The Queen's private rooms were sacred. Only her most trusted advisors were allowed to enter, and even they needed special permission. For a stranger, an outsider, a member of a species barely anyone had heard of, to be invited, there was unthinkable. Her advisors protested. Chancellor Mathis, a tall being with gray skin and eyes that glowed like cold fire, was especially upset. "Your Majesty, this is not wise," he said. "We know nothing about these humans. He could be a spy. He could be dangerous. Ziritha looked at him with amusement. Dangerous? He weighs less than my arm. His species cannot survive without special suits in most environments. He carries no weapons that our scanners can detect. What exactly do you think he is going to do to me? It is not about physical danger, Mathis insisted. It is about the message this sends. The other delegates will think you have lost your mind, choosing a human over the great powers of the galaxy. Let them think what they want, Ziritha said. Bring him to me. Daniel Carter was escorted through the winding corridors of the palace by a group of guards, who looked at him like he was some kind of strange animal. He did not seem to mind. He looked around at everything with open curiosity, taking in the strange architecture, the floating lights, the walls that seemed to breathe. When he entered the Queen's private chambers, he stopped for a moment. The room was filled with objects from 1,000 different worlds. There were crystals that sang soft melodies, weapons that crackled with energy, paintings made of living color, sculptures that moved and changed when you looked at them. Each item was a gift from some conquered world or desperate ally. Do you like my collection? Ziritha asked. She was sitting in a chair that looked like it was made of frozen lightning, watching him carefully. It is impressive, Daniel said, but it also seems a little sad. No one had ever said something like that to her before. Sad? These are the greatest treasures of the galaxy. I know, Daniel said, but they are all just sitting here, in a room that almost no one ever sees. They were made by people who wanted to create something beautiful, something meaningful. And now they are just decorations. Ziritha was quiet for a moment. She had never thought about it that way. You are a strange creature, Daniel Carter. I get that a lot, he said with a small smile. She gestured for him to sit, and he did. He looked comfortable, which was unusual. Most visitors to this room were so nervous they could barely speak. You puzzle me, the Queen said. Every other species came here today with something to gain. They offered gifts, but only because they wanted protection. You said you have nothing to offer, yet you came anyway. I want to understand why. Daniel thought about this for a moment. He was not rushing to answer, not trying to say what he thought she wanted to hear. He was actually thinking. On Earth, he said finally, we have a saying. The only thing necessary for evil to win is for good people to do nothing. The Void Swarm is coming. It will destroy everything eventually. If we hide, we die. If we fight, we probably still die. But at least if we fight, we die trying to do something about it. That sounds like a philosophy of despair, Ziritha observed. Maybe, Daniel admitted. But it is also a philosophy of hope. Humans have always been the underdogs. Our planet tried to kill us with ice ages and diseases and natural disasters. Other species found us and treated us like animals. Everyone always told us we were too weak, too fragile, too primitive to matter. And yet here I am, sitting in your palace, having a conversation with the most powerful being in the galaxy. Ziritha found herself smiling, which surprised her. She had not smiled genuinely in a very long time. You believe you can defeat the Void Swarm through stubbornness? She asked. I believe that giving up guarantees failure, Daniel replied. Fighting gives us a chance, even if it is a small one. And humans are pretty good surviving when we should not. Tell me about your world, the Queen said. Tell me about humanity. So Daniel talked. He talked for hours, and Ziritha listened. He told her about Earth, a small blue planet that was mostly water. He described the mountains and oceans, the forests and deserts. He talked about the animals that lived there, the millions of different species that shared the world with humans. He told her about human history. It was not a pretty story. Humans had fought countless wars against each other. They had done terrible things in the name of power and greed. They had nearly destroyed their own planet more than once. But he also told her about the other side of humanity. He talked about artists who created beauty that made people cry. He talked about scientists who spent their entire lives trying to understand the universe, not for money or power, but simply because they wanted to know. He talked about ordinary people who risked everything to help strangers, who stood up against injustice even when it cost them their lives. "We are not a perfect species," Daniel said. "We are probably not even a good species most of the time. We make the same mistakes over and over again. We hurt each other. We hurt ourselves. But we also keep trying to do better. Every generation looks at the mistakes of the past and says, we can be better than this. And sometimes we actually are." Ziritha thought about her own people. The Virith had been powerful for so long that they had forgotten what it was like to struggle. They had conquered so many worlds that they had forgotten what it meant to be conquered. They had become cold and calculating, seeing other species only as resources to be used or threats to be eliminated. "You humans," she said slowly, "you feel things very deeply, do you not?" "Sometimes too deeply," Daniel admitted. "It gets us into trouble a lot. We fall in love with people who hurt us. We fight for causes that are already lost. We hope for things that will never happen. But I think that is also our greatest strength. We care about things. We care about each other. We care about the future, even though we will not be there to see most of it. That is very different from how my people think," Ziritha said. "Is it bad?" She considered the question. "No, just different. I have lived for 3,000 years. In all that time, I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched species grow and change and die. After a while, you start to feel disconnected from it all. It becomes hard to care about anything." "That sounds lonely," Daniel said quietly. Ziritha looked at him. In 3,000 years, no one had ever said that to her. No one had ever thought about whether she might be lonely. She was the queen. She was powerful beyond measure. How could she possibly be lonely? But she was. She had been lonely for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like not to be. "Your species," she said. "You only live for about 100 years, correct?" "If we are lucky," Daniel said. "Does that not frighten you? To know that your time is so short?" Daniel smiled. "Sometimes. But mostly it just makes us want to make the most of the time we have. Every moment matters because we do not have many of them. Every relationship is precious because we know it will not last forever. Every choice is important because we will not get many chances to choose." Ziritha was quiet for a long time after that. She was thinking about her own life, about the centuries she had spent doing things that did not matter, surrounded by people who only wanted things from her. "Thank you, Daniel Carter," she said finally. "You have given me much to think about. Does this mean you will consider an alliance with Earth?" He asked. "I will do more than consider it," she replied. "I have made my decision. The Dominion will stand with humanity." Daniel's eyes widened. "Really? But we have nothing to offer. You have offered me something more valuable than all the treasures in this room," Ziritha said. "You have reminded me what it means to truly live. That is worth more than any fleet or mineral or weapon." She stood and extended her clawed hand. Daniel stood and took it, his small fingers wrapping around one of her claws. "We will fight the Void Swarm together," she said. "And perhaps we will both learn something from each other along the way." The news of Queen Ziritha's decision spread across the galaxy like a wave. Within hours, every species that had attended the assembly knew that the mighty Varith Dominion had chosen to ally with humanity. And none of them could understand why the Dominion Council gathered in emergency session the next day. The council chamber was smaller than the Great Hall, but no less impressive. Its walls were covered with the banners of conquered worlds, and the floor was made of metal that had been taken from the core of a dead star. 12 of the most powerful advisors in the empire sat around a circular table, and at the head of that table sat Queen Ziritha. She looked calm, which made her advisors even more nervous. Admiral Corvin spoke first. He was the commander of the Dominion's war fleet, a massive creature with thick gray hide and arms that could crush stone. He had fought in 100 wars and won every single one. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice rumbling like distant thunder, "I must speak plainly. This alliance makes no sense. The humans have nothing to offer us. Their fleet is tiny. Their technology is primitive. Their homeworld has no strategic value. They are not even a warrior species. They are soft and weak." "They are not weak," Ziritha replied calmly. "They are simply different." "Different does not win wars," Corvin insisted. "We need ships and weapons and soldiers. We need species that can actually fight. The Void Swarm is the greatest threat we have ever faced, and you want to ally with creatures who need suits just to breathe on most planets?" Chancellor Mathis nodded in agreement. "The other powers are already laughing at us. They think you have gone mad. Some are even saying that the human must have used some kind of mind control on you." "They can say what they like," Ziritha said. "But Your Majesty, surely you see the problem," said another advisor, a thin creature named Veth, who handled the Empire's finances. "Resources are limited. Every ship we send to protect the humans is a ship we cannot use elsewhere. Every credit we spend on this alliance is a credit we cannot spend on weapons. We must be practical." "Practical?" Ziritha repeated. She stood up slowly, and the entire council fell silent. When she spoke again, her voice was low and dangerous. "I have been practical for 3,000 years. I have made alliances based on calculation. I have chosen friends based on what they could offer me. I have conquered worlds because it was efficient and eliminated species because they were inconvenient. And what has it gotten me?" She looked around the table, meeting each of her advisors' eyes in turn. "Fear," she said. "I am surrounded by species who fear me. They smile and bow and say pretty words, but I can see the truth. They hate me. They would destroy me in an instant if they thought they could get away with it. Every alliance I have is built on threats and bribes. Every friendship is fake." "That is the nature of power," Mathis said carefully. "No," Ziritha replied. "That is the nature of fear. And fear is not enough to defeat the Void Swarm." She began to walk around the table, her footsteps echoing in the silent chamber. "I have studied our enemies. The Swarm does not feel fear. It does not make bargains or calculate advantages. It simply consumes. Every species that has faced it has tried to buy it off, to negotiate with it, to offer it something in exchange for peace. And every species has been destroyed." She stopped behind Admiral Corvin's chair. "We cannot defeat the Swarm by being practical. We cannot defeat it by being calculating. We need something more. We need allies who will fight not because they have to, but because they believe it is right. We need warriors who will stand even when there is no hope of victory. And you think the humans are such warriors?" Corvin asked, skepticism clear in his voice. "I know they are," Ziritha said. "I spoke with Daniel Carter for hours yesterday. He told me about human history. Do you know what I learned? Humans have spent most of their existence fighting battles they could not win. They have faced enemies larger and stronger and better armed, and they have fought anyway. Not because they were certain of victory, but because they refused to surrender." She returned to her seat. "Every species that came to our assembly yesterday brought gifts. They offered me things in exchange for protection. They were trying to buy safety. The humans came with nothing except themselves. They knew they would probably die, and they came anyway." The council was quiet. They had never seen their queen speak with such passion. "There is something else," Ziritha continued. I have looked at the delegates we received yesterday. I have studied their histories. Do you know what I found? Not one of them has ever faced a true test. They have all grown powerful in times of peace. They have never had to struggle, never had to fight for their survival. They do not know what it means to truly risk everything. But the humans do? Veth asked. The humans do. Their planet tried to kill them with ice ages. Diseases wiped out millions of them. Other species invaded their world and treated them like animals. And through it all, they survived. They are not powerful because they were born that way. They are powerful because they earned it through suffering and sacrifice. Admiral Coven stroked his chin, thinking, even if what you say is true, Your Majesty, how can 300 human ships make a difference against the swarm? We have lost millions of ships already. It is not about numbers, Zirida said. It is about spirit. When the other species see a small, weak young race standing against the swarm, it will inspire them. It will shame them. If the humans can fight, how can they justify hiding? She pressed a button on the table, and a hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed a map of the galaxy, with the void swarm's advance marked in red. The red zone was growing larger every day. We have 6 months before a swarm reaches our territory. In that time, I want the human fleet to be fully integrated with ours. I want their ships upgraded with our technology. I want their soldiers trained by our best warriors. When the battle comes, they will stand at the front, and the whole galaxy will be watching. And if they fail? Mathis asked quietly. Then at least they will have tried, Zirida replied. That is more than most species can say. The council was silent for a long moment. Then, one by one, the advisors nodded their acceptance. They did not fully understand their queen's decision, but they trusted her. She had led them through 3,000 years of victory. Perhaps she knew something they did not. After the meeting, Zirida summoned Daniel Carter again. He arrived looking tired but alert, his simple uniform standing out among the elaborate decorations of the palace. Your alliance has been approved, she told him. The Dominion will stand with humanity. Daniel's face broke into a smile. Thank you, Your Majesty. You will not regret this. I know, she replied. But I must warn you. The path ahead will be difficult. Many of my people still doubt you. Many of our allies think I have made a mistake. You will have to prove yourselves. We are used to that, Daniel said. It seems like we are always having to prove ourselves. There is something else, Zirida said. She stepped closer to him, looking down at the small human with something that might have been respect. When the battle comes, I want you to stand beside me. Not your admirals or your politicians. You. Daniel looked surprised. Me? I am just a diplomat. I am not a soldier. You are the one who came here with nothing but courage and conviction, Zirida said. You are the one who reminded me what it means to truly believe in something. When the galaxy sees us stand together, it needs to see that. It needs to see that our alliance is real, not just a political arrangement. Daniel thought about this for a moment. Then he nodded. If that is what you need, then I will be there. Good, Zirida said. She allowed herself a small smile. I have a feeling, Daniel Carter, that this is the beginning of something important. Something that will change the galaxy forever. I hope so, Daniel replied. Otherwise, we are all in a lot of trouble. For the first time in centuries, Queen Zirida laughed. It was a genuine laugh, warm and full of life. And Daniel Carter laughed with her dot outside the palace windows. The stars continued to shine. But somewhere out there, in the darkness between galaxies, the Void Swarm was coming. And for the first time, it would face an enemy that was not afraid. 6 months passed faster than anyone expected. During that time, the human fleet was transformed. Dominion engineers worked day and night to upgrade their ships with shields, weapons, and engines that would have taken human centuries to develop on their own. Human soldiers trained alongside Varith warriors, learning techniques that had been perfected over thousands of years. But the humans also taught the Dominion things that could not be measured in technology. They brought music and art and stories. They laughed and cried and argued passionately about things that seemed unimportant. They formed friendships with species that should have been their enemies, finding common ground in the strangest places. And then the Void Swarm arrived. The first reports came from the outer colonies. A mining station had gone silent. Then another. Then an entire planet. Scouts were sent to investigate, and the few that returned brought images that made even the bravest warriors tremble. The swarm was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was not an army or a fleet. It was a living darkness, a mass of creatures that moved through space like a wave of hungry shadows. Each creature was small on its own, barely bigger than a human hand. But there were trillions of them, so many that they blocked out the light of stars. When they reached a world, they covered it like a living blanket and consumed everything. Plants, animals, buildings, even the rocks and the air. They left nothing behind but bare, dead stone. The Allied fleet gathered at a place called the Threshold, a narrow passage between two black holes that was the only route into the Dominion's core worlds. It was here that the final battle would be fought. If the swarm passed this point, nothing could stop it. Thousands of Dominion warships formed the heart of the Armada. They were massive things, each one capable of destroying a moon. Around them gathered vessels from 24 allied species, a collection of shapes and sizes that would have seemed impossible a year ago. And among them, looking almost comically small, was the human fleet. 300 ships. That was all humanity had been able to send. 300 vessels crewed by men and women who had traveled across the galaxy to fight in a war that was not really theirs. Daniel Carter stood on the bridge of the human flagship, a ship they had named the Endeavor. Beside him was Admiral Lisa Brennan, the commander of the human forces. She was a tall woman with short gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. She had been fighting since before Daniel was born, and she had never lost a war. But as she looked at the tactical display showing the approaching swarm, even she seemed uncertain. "Conventional weapons are not working," she said quietly. "The Dominion has been fighting these things for months. Nothing works for long. The swarm adapts too quickly." Daniel nodded. He had been studying the reports. The swarm was not just a mindless horde. It was connected somehow. Every creature was linked to every other creature, sharing information instantly across distances that should have been impossible. When one creature learned how to resist a weapon, all of them learned at the same time. "Then we need to try something unconventional," he said. In the weeks before the battle, Daniel had gathered a team of the best human scientists and asked them a simple question. What could humans do that no other species could? The answer had taken him by surprise. Humans were good at chaos. It sounded like an insult at first. But the more Daniel thought about it, the more it made sense. Human culture was a mess of contradictions. Humans valued logic, but also believed in things they could not prove. They created art that made no practical sense. They told jokes and played games and invented stories that were completely made up. They could be having a serious conversation about the fate of the universe and suddenly start laughing about something ridiculous. Other species found this confusing and sometimes annoying. But the scientists realized it might be exactly what the swarm could not handle. The swarm had evolved to process threats. It analyzed weapons and developed countermeasures. It studied tactics and found weaknesses. It was a perfect, logical machine for adaptation. But it had never encountered anything like human creativity. If we flood their network with chaos, Daniel explained to Queen Ziratha during their final strategy meeting. It might overwhelm their ability to adapt. They are trying to understand a threat so they can counter it. But human culture is not a threat. It is not logical. It does not make sense. Admiral Corvin looked skeptical. You want to fight the Void Swarm with jokes and music? And poetry and images and random thoughts and everything else we can think of, Daniel confirmed. We broadcast it directly into their network. We make them try to process things that cannot be processed. That is the strangest battle plan I have ever heard, Corvin said. Is it any stranger than anything else we have tried? Daniel asked. You have thrown weapons at them, and they adapted. You have tried to poison them, and they developed immunity. You have tried to cut them off from each other, and they found new ways to connect. What do you have to lose by trying something completely different? The council was silent. Finally, Ziratha spoke. The humans will lead the assault, she said. They will take their ships directly into the heart of the swarm and begin the broadcast. That is suicide, Corvin protested. They will be surrounded. They will be consumed. We know, Daniel said quietly. Every one of us volunteered. We understand what we are signing up for. Ziratha looked at him for a long moment. Here was a species that had known about the galaxy for only a few centuries, offering to sacrifice themselves for a fight that was not theirs. She remembered what Daniel had said when they first met. They could not just stay home and do nothing. The Dominion flagship will lead the assault alongside the human fleet, she announced. If humanity is willing to die for this alliance, then so am I. Her advisors erupted in protest, but she silenced them with a look. This is not a debate. This is my decision. Later, after the meeting, Daniel found Ziratha standing alone on the observation deck, looking out at the gathered fleet. You do not have to do this, he said. Your people need you. If you die, the Dominion will fall into chaos. Perhaps, Ziratha replied. But if I hide while others fight, what kind of leader am I? You have taught me something, Daniel Carter. You have taught me that true power is not about having the biggest fleet or the strongest weapons. It is about being willing to stand when everyone else runs. Daniel joined her at the window. The stars outside looked cold and distant. Are you afraid? He asked. Yes, she admitted. For the first time in centuries, I am afraid. But I am also excited. I have not felt this alive in so long. It is strange. That is what having something to fight for feels like, Daniel said. When you care about something, really care, everything becomes more intense. The fear is worse, but so is the hope. Ziratha nodded slowly. Perhaps that is what my people have lost. We conquered so many worlds, became so powerful, that we stopped caring about anything. We had nothing to fight for except more power. And power for its own sake is empty. It is not too late, Daniel said. Whatever happens tomorrow, you have already changed. And change is the beginning of everything. The Queen looked down at the small human beside her. He was nothing compared to her in terms of size or strength or lifespan. And yet he had given her more in a few months than anyone had given her in 3,000 years. Thank you, she said softly, for reminding me what it means to be alive. Daniel smiled. That is what humans do. We are pretty annoying that way. Ziratha laughed, and the sound echoed across the observation deck. Tomorrow, they would fly into battle against an enemy that had never been defeated. Tomorrow, they would probably die. But tonight, for this one moment, they were at peace. The Void Swarm drew closer, blotting out the stars, and the Allied fleet prepared to meet it. The Battle of the Threshold began at dawn, though in space there was no real dawn, only the eternal darkness between stars. But the humans had insisted on marking the moment somehow, and so all the ships in the fleet synchronized their clocks to Earth time and watched as the numbers counted down to 0. And then they charged. The human ships and the Dominion flagship flew straight into the heart of the swarm, broadcasting everything humanity had ever created. Rock music and classical symphonies, comedy shows and tragic poetry, mathematical equations and children's drawings, cat videos and philosophical debates. 1,000 years of human culture compressed into a single, overwhelming signal. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The swarm had never encountered anything like this. Its network, designed to analyze and adapt to threats, suddenly found itself flooded with information that made no sense. What was the threat level of a song about love? How should it counter a painting of a sunset? What was the appropriate response to a joke? The creatures began to behave strangely. Some of them stopped moving entirely, frozen as their tiny minds tried to process the impossible flood of data. Others started moving in random directions, bumping into each other, attacking things that were not there. The perfect coordination that had made them so deadly began to break down. The Allied fleet struck while the swarm was confused. Dominion warships unleashed weapons that could tear holes in reality. Smaller vessels darted between the frozen creatures, picking off groups that had become separated from the main mass. For the first time since the war began, the swarm was losing, but it was not a clean victory. Far from it. The swarm was too vast to be defeated by confusion alone. Even as some creatures froze, others adapted. They began to develop filters, ways to block out the human broadcasts. The window of confusion was closing, and the human ships were taking damage. Daniel Carter stood on the bridge of the Endeavor as alarms blared around him. The ship shook as another wave of creatures slammed into its shields. The broadcast was still going out, but the power was failing. "We are losing containment on Deck 7, someone shouted. "They are getting through." Admiral Brennan was everywhere at once, giving orders, rallying the crew, keeping the ship fighting even as pieces of it were torn away. Her face was grim but determined. "Keep the broadcast going," she ordered. "As long as we are transmitting, we are making a difference." A section of the hull ruptured, and swarm creatures poured into the ship. Security teams rushed to contain them, humans fighting side by side with Dominion soldiers who had been assigned as advisors. The battle was desperate and brutal. Daniel grabbed a weapon and joined the fight. He was not a soldier, not really. He was a diplomat, a talker, someone who won battles with words instead of guns. But right now, words were not enough. Right now, he needed to stand with his people. He was wounded when a swarm creature slashed across his arm, its tiny claws cutting through his uniform and into the flesh beneath. The pain was intense, but he kept fighting. He saw others fall around him and forced himself not to think about it. There would be time to mourn later. Right now, there was only the next enemy, the next shot, the next moment. Somewhere in the chaos, a young engineer named Sophie Mitchell was working frantically in the ship's damaged laboratory. She had been analyzing the swarm's network ever since the battle began, looking for patterns, looking for weaknesses. And she had found something. "There is a frequency," she said to herself, her fingers flying over the controls. "There is a specific frequency that disrupts their biological processes." She tested it on a small sample of swarm creatures that had been captured earlier. The effect was dramatic. The creatures immediately turned on each other, tearing themselves apart with their own claws. Whatever connected them, whatever made them a unified force, was being broken at the most basic level. Sophie rushed to the bridge, dodging battles and jumping over debris. She found Admiral Brennan and shouted her discovery over the noise of the fighting. "Can you broadcast it to the entire swarm?" Brennan asked. "I need more power," Sophie said. "The ship cannot generate enough on its own." Brennan made a decision. "Reroute everything. Life support, weapons, shields. put it all into the broadcast. But the crew will have about 10 minutes of air. That should be enough. Do it. Sophie ran back to the laboratory and began the modifications. The lights on the ship flickered and died as power was diverted. The weapons went silent. The shields fell. For a few terrible moments, the Endeavor was completely defenseless. But then the broadcast began. The frequency washed over the swarm, like a wave of pure destruction. Creatures that had been attacking suddenly stopped. Their bodies twitched and shook. And then they turned on each other. Their tiny minds no longer able to tell friend from enemy, thought the effect spread outward from the Endeavor, carried by the broadcast into the heart of the swarm. More and more creatures were affected. The unity that had made them invincible was shattered. They became a mass of confused, fighting individuals. The Allied fleet pressed the advantage. Dominion warships carved paths through the disordered enemy. Species that had been rivals for centuries fought side by side against a common threat. The battle that had seemed hopeless was turning. Queen Ziritha watched from her flagship as the tide shifted. She had been fighting alongside her warriors, leading from the front as she had promised. Her scales were stained with the blood of fallen swarm creatures, and her body ached from wounds she had not even noticed receiving. "Find the Endeavor," she ordered. "They are the ones who turned this battle. We need to protect them." Her ship pushed through the chaos until they found the human vessel. It was badly damaged, barely holding together. But it was still broadcasting, still fighting, still alive. When the battle finally ended 3 days later, the Void Swarm was broken. Its network was shattered beyond recovery. The creatures that remained were no longer a unified threat, just scattered remnants that could be hunted down and destroyed at leisure. The cost had been terrible. Millions had died. Thousands of ships had been lost. But the galaxy had survived. Queen Ziritha went to the Endeavor personally to find Daniel Carter. She found him in the medical bay, his arm wrapped in bandages, helping to tend to other wounded crew members despite his own injuries. "You should be resting," she said. "There is plenty of time to rest later," he replied with a tired smile. "Right now, people need help." Ziritha looked around the medical bay. Humans and Dominion soldiers lay side by side. Species that had never spoken to each other before the war were now talking and laughing and grieving together. Something had changed during the battle. The alliance she had formed out of calculation had become something real. "I have lived for 3,000 years, she said quietly. "I have seen empires rise and fall. I have witnessed wonders and horrors beyond counting. I thought I understood what strength was. But I was wrong." She placed her clawed hand gently on Daniel's shoulder. "Strength is not power or technology or conquest. Strength is choosing to stand when it would be easier to kneel. Choosing to hope when despair is the logical response. Choosing to fight for others when self-preservation demands you flee." Daniel looked up at her. "That sounds like something a human would say." "Perhaps," Ziritha replied. "Perhaps that is the point. Of all the gifts the galaxy's greatest civilizations offered me, none were as valuable as the gift your people brought. You showed us what it truly means to be worthy." In the months that followed, the galaxy was rebuilt. The United Human Coalition became the Dominion's closest ally, their fleets working together to hunt down the last remnants of the swarm and protect the wounded. Civilizations that had survived. Species that had been rivals for centuries found common ground. Old hatreds were set aside in favor of new partnerships. Daniel Carter never returned to being just a diplomat. He became the official ambassador of humanity to the Dominion, the first human to hold such a position. He spent the rest of his life traveling between worlds, building bridges, resolving conflicts, showing the galaxy that the species they had once dismissed as primitive and weak had something valuable to offer after all. And Queen Ziritha changed as well. She opened her palace to visitors for the first time in centuries. She listened to her subjects instead of simply commanding them. She learned to laugh again, to hope again, to care about things beyond power and survival. The cold, calculating ruler that her advisors had known for so long was gone. In her place was someone who had remembered what it meant to be alive. Years later, when historians asked Queen Zaritha why she had chosen to ally with humanity, her answer was always the same. Every other world offered me their riches, their power, their knowledge. They offered me things, as if that was what I wanted. But the humans offered me themselves. Their courage, their creativity, their stubborn refusal to give up even when everything seemed hopeless. They reminded me that the universe is not just a collection of resources to be conquered. It is a place of wonder and beauty and meaning, if only we have the courage to see it. She would pause then, looking out at the stars with eyes that had seen 3,000 years of history. They were the smallest and weakest species at that assembly, and they were the only ones who offered me something real. That, in the end, was worth more than all the treasures of the universe.